know, this session is about special places and special status. And I'm going to begin by asking each of my speakers to introduce themselves in the context of this topic, and then we'll take it from there. And then I will introduce myself in this context as we go. So, Pulapati, you please introduce yourself and tell us why you so passionately feel that Kurg is a special place. We'll come to the special status in the next. So, you have 7 minutes. Yes, to introduce yourself and to say how special Kurg is and what is so special about it. Yes, that's right.
Good morning. How many of you have heard of Kurg? Please raise your hands. So that's not too many. Okay. Kurg. A book. Alright. I'm actually here somewhat by default because my wife is the anthropologist. I happen to be dyed in the wool corporate type, lived all over the world, and got completely immersed in understanding about my community when my wife, who's the anthropologist, started writing a book, which is her life's work, on the cultural, it was a deep cultural study about the Kurg. So she was studying at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, doing social anthropology, both a master's and then later. And she actually went about documenting the various cultural aspects, the festivals, the uniqueness of Kurg as a small community, despite being in the mass of India's population, which is quite unique, that we've been able to retain our identity as a very small group of less than 200,000, 2 lakh people. But she wrote, and when she wrote, it was a 2.5 kilo tome. I've got a copy of the book here. And it is both with photographs, because it had to capture the actual elements that are taking place. And she wrote, the title of the book is called The Vanishing Kodavas. And as the book says, this is a book which is about the voices of the people. History in many parts of the world has been written through the lens of the person who ruled that part of the world. So Kurg history was essentially that of a colonial slant. And while there's excellent documentation which was done by the priests and the agents of the British system, the colonial rule, it was all slanted to show that these people were illiterate, they didn't have any culture, they didn't have anything what it is. But what we learned when we actually went to the villages is that it has a very distinct culture. It has a very distinct pattern of food, and she's in fact addressing something else on the food patterns and culture in another panel as I speak. And when we trace our history, there are elements which say that we could have come from Crete 2,000 years ago and settled down through many iterations of migration, and settled down, came up the Malabar coast and found this place. It's a very hilly, beautiful tract, and followed a lot of the customs which were there even to this day in Crete. In fact, she collaborated with a professor from the Sorbonne, a Greek professor, and they were able to find out so many similarities. The river Kaveri, there's a link to the goddess of fertility called Kerberos. Otherwise, Kaveri does not appear anywhere other than when most of India's tribal regions and hilly tracts got converted to Hinduism by default. So today, if I have to enter my application anywhere, I can't say I'm a Kurg. You have very limited items to tick off, so you say you're Hindu. In reality, we are not. We have our own system of ancestral worship. We have our own oral tradition, which is a very valid way of recording microhistories. And what she has done through the voice of the people has identified lots of unique aspects about this place. It was a separate country. It was existed for a couple of thousand years. The last was that we actually had installed Lingayat Rajas because we fought like all communities amongst ourselves, but we're very happy to help someone else put in place and be the de facto rulers in the back. The British then came and took over, deposed the Raja, saying he was a lunatic and a tyrant for obvious reasons, which in her book she has shown very categorically that's not the case. And neither was he a Lingayat, having married into the dynasty, having married into Kurd women, was probably more Kurd than many Kurds themselves, because we had so many people coming in from neighboring districts and occupying the land. So the genesis of this problem as to should we be a special people getting special status, all that, we'll come to that at the right appropriate moment. But in 1956, we were taken, our Part C status was taken away to say that there was a majority of Kannada speaking people, and we became part of Mysore. And since then, there's been a travesty of administration, corruption. It used to be a model state. From 1952 to 56, when it was a Part C state administered by Kurds, it really was described as Sardar Patel as Ram Raj. You could go into a government office, get your land records, whatever work done, and come out in the evening. It was that good. They're the highest, one of the highest states of literacy. It had hospitals at a radius of every 8 kilometers, second only to Delhi. It had a surplus in 1956 of 80 lakh rupees for a very small place. So there was no reason that we got merged with Mysore, with the Vadiyar clan with whom we fought for thousands of years. So this is not about trying to rewrite things have happened. We've got to take a stance and say, do we look and take a right stance of saying decisions were made appropriately for the moment, but should we relook those and give it a kind of identity? Because just like biodiversity, you need cultural diversity. And that is what Kurd is all about.
Before I ask Prajal, I just want to say, in fact, Kurd is the district Kurd, which is in Karnataka now, is 4,120 square kilometers, which is a little more than Goa. Both are in western Ghats, and I think one of the areas which makes them special is the ecological aspect, which we will go into. But Prajal, I want you to first introduce yourself, and also to see what is special. And as a historian, I would ask that I don't think we need to have a golden age in the past in order to justify a special or uniqueness of any particular area.
हांव प्रज्वल साखरतंडे आनी तुमकां सगळ्यांक म्हजो माय मोगाचो येवकार नमस्कार. I spoke in Konkani because I introduced in Konkani because that is my connect with the land in which I am born. My ancestors were born, and I am very proud of the fact that I am a Goan Indian. I am presently the president of Goa's Movement for Special Status and also the chairperson of Goa Heritage Action Group, and I teach in Dempe College history, and I can see a number of students of mine in the audience, and I can also see Professor Kiran Budkule here, and my friend Prava Rai, who is a member of Goa Heritage Action Group, Cyril Fernandez, Joao Fernandez, and Devidas Gaonkar, and many others. Now, are we special? Are Goans special? I do not consider us as special, but definitely we need a special status for Goa, for the land, to protect Goan land, to protect Goa's losing identity, to save Goa from extinction and to preserve Goa's natural, cultural, historical, built heritage and the Konkani language. For all this, we require a special status because we are very small. We are 3,702 square kilometers, the tiniest state in India, smallest state in India, and we cannot afford to have the teeming millions of the world overwhelming the local population, as he said in the case of Kur. To protect our very existence. If you look at the history of Goa, while the rest of the country was under British rule, Goa was under Portuguese rule. In 1510, Goa came under the Portuguese rule, and then it continued, the Portuguese rule continued up to 1961, of course, with varying boundaries. It's not that uniformly the whole of Goa, the whole of present day boundaries of Goa came under the Portuguese rule, uniformly under them in 1510. First it was the Tiswadi Island, right now we are on the Tiswadi Island, then Bardesh, Salsette, and the remaining talukas. The last taluka that came under the Portuguese rule, which is in the north of Goa, as late as 1788. There were conversions here, and this history of conversions created at that point of time a new kind of identity, and it evolved as Indo-Portuguese fusion. So today when you look at Goa, it is a blend of East, it is a blend of India, and it is also having the Western aspect to it due to the colonial rule. So that does make Goa unique in comparison with the rest of the country. While we do not find that the British were here for evangelization or Anglicization, the Portuguese definitely created a Luso-Indian kind of a culture. And the indigenous population of Goa, which is completely marginalized, I would say the Kundis, Gaudas, Bedips, who actually set up the Gaonkari system, that's the village communities, and they also require special status within this broader ambit of special status which we are asking. The word status is not there in the constitution. We will require an amendment to the constitution to introduce that word status, because what we have are special provisions. So we need special status. It is the need of the hour, and since 2008 we have been asking for special status, and we are trying to move in the right direction, I suppose, and we do need special status.
Now, as of now in the constitution, the 8 states of Northeast plus Jammu and Kashmir have their special provisions. But it is basically Kashmir and Nagaland which have special provisions for protection of their culture, language, etc. But I don't want to go into the culture, language and these issues, but I do want to point out that within the constitution, when they have the special provisions for these, it is in the context of Northeast, the governor is given extra power. So although there are special provisions for protection of the specific cultures and language and religion of the Northeast states and specifically Nagaland, the governor has powers to overrule elected governments. So one has to be extremely careful, because when they were asking for this special provision, they did not realize that what they had got into, the center used that demand to impose or to control by giving the governor extra powers. So we'll come to these legal problems, but I want to really ask in a very sharply, I want you to pose, both of you, is that what is it that you wish to preserve? What is it, do you wish to preserve something? The question is that. Because in this context, we always talk about preserving something, and I'm not sure what it is. So what is it, can you, in say 5 minutes, explain just what is it that you wish to preserve in a Kurdi identity?
Rather than be bound by time frame, it may be less, more probability. What I would like to say is that, very similar to what my friend said about Goa, land gives people their identity. It's not to say that it in any way diminishes the fact that we are Indian nationals. And like I said, just like biodiversity, cultural diversity just improves the strength of a community. I was in New York last week, and you'll find in New York 100 cultures, but they're American. Their strength in what happens as a nation. So what is really the problem in Kurg is that, first with the Brits introducing coffee plantations, we were essentially people, I wouldn't say hunter-gatherers, but people who lived off the forest and had a relationship with nature. We respected land, we respected nature. And we created a fine balance of existence with nature. And that got completely destroyed when 80,000 acres of pristine bamboo forests were destroyed to make coffee plantations. But worse than that was that there was the influx of labor which came in from adjoining places and changed the entire characteristic of the land. But despite that, the Kurds held on. We had our festivals. We had a very unique way of existence. For example, women's rights in Kurg is far ahead of any other community that I know of. The role of we don't have, for example, priests in our weddings. It's all conducted by ourselves. We don't have priests in our temples. It was done by locals. The role of community and the importance of community work, the equality amongst people. There was absolutely no problem. Yesterday I heard a beautiful part of a session which said, how does Goa manage to live in its various communities? The fact is, even in Kurg, there were the Maplas, the Muslims and the Christians who lived in perfect harmony, and we actually participated in each other's festivals wearing the Kurg dress. All that is gone. And there was, when Kurg became part of Mysore, there were promises which were made by various people, and that's not the intent of this session, that the identity of Kurg would be retained. The fact is that Kurg has been treated like a place which has been conquered after thousands of years of war. And a state which was a model state with a surplus which knew how to administer itself. In fact, the ministers from Mysore said that you're 50 years ahead of us, so you can wait for another 50 years, quite literally. And that is what hurts the Kurds. And today we have really become minority in our own land and have lost and beginning to lose our identity even more because of tourism. And we're very scared, and we don't have all the protective laws that some places like Himachal have, where people are coming in, the land mafia is coming and buying up these large tracts and converting it into tourism resorts. And you know what happens as a consequence. In Kurg, we had a lovely provision of Jamma holdings, which means if you till the land till the sun rises and sets, and during your lifetime, and your children's lifetime, you have the right to use that land. It was government's land, it was the people's land, you could not sell it. What a beautiful system. And we are all children of our goddess Kaveri. And it is on our customs and festivals, we earmark, we put a stake at a particular time to say, the goddess comes and visits our paddy fields to show that we are tilling that land for her and keeping it well. Legend of Karberos from Crete. Very unique, very different, and all that is going because the Karnataka government wants to take over the Jamma land, saying these are government lands, and giving it to various people with political favor. So these are issues which are really hurtful, and what one is asking for is autonomous ability to govern yourself and protect yourself before things degenerate to a point that you have no identity.
Two things. One is land and the other is identity. Now, again, I'm just bringing to you the experience of Northeast because, and especially the way that law is used to undermine this, is that today the government of India, and not only government of India, UN bodies and Western NGOs have floated the idea that you can have an identity which is not linked to territory. Now this in itself is an oxymoron for people who are linked to the land and their identity is defined by the land. However, there is a very intense debate and the voices of indigenous people are not heard because they are told that they can have an identity without the territory. Now, in that context, and I'm coming to Goa now, is the other issue that one of us mentioned is migration. Now, you are swamped by people wherever you are in small places, whether it's a little Nagaland or it may be Kurg or it is Goa. But on the other hand, let's see the other way around, is that who are the people in Goa, and I work mostly with the Northeast people who are working in Goa, and they are products of a policy which does not allow development, partly because of protection of land which is not marketable, partly because people are not allowed to go in and do development, partly because they have been protected, the kind of protection that you are asking for, partly. So again the question is, can you preserve two questions? Can you preserve a Goan identity while having migrant labor? Because it's now known all over the world that migrants add to your economy. The migrants who do not perhaps add are the rich people who own your hotel industry and the resorts. But the poor migrant workers are adding to the economy as Indian migrant workers add to Canadian economy. So is there a possibility of a Goan identity, or Kurd identity, or Indian identity, or Bengali identity, which takes into account the migrant population and the issue of land, because the migrants don't necessarily occupy that land. It is the so-called development through which land is going. It's a lot of questions, but at the same time.
The movement to seek special status for Goa, first of all, let me make it clear at the outset, shouldn't be looked upon as a parochial, regionalist or sectarian kind of a movement, because what we want to preserve, if you ask me about preserving, we definitely want to preserve Goan identity, which is getting diluted due to the influx which a small state of Goa cannot hold this influx, because everybody says that they love Goa and it's very nice to hear that, but when it is the question of the land, as I have said earlier that we are just 3,702 square kilometers, we do not have the land. Our hills are being denuded of its greenery. There are bungalows being built by people from all parts of the world. Hills are being cut. Now the question which was asked to me is, could there be local laws to protect this? There could be local laws, yes, definitely. In fact, through the regional plan, we have tried to suggest, in fact each of the Gram Sabhas in Goa have tried to suggest numerous, there are numerous suggestions to preserve and protect Goan land. But the question that we want to ask is, that under Article 19 of the Indian Constitution says that anybody can travel anywhere and anybody can reside anywhere in any part of India as per the Constitution. So, if we make a local law that land cannot be sold to people from outside, what is the guarantee that the next government that comes will reverse that? Okay, as it is happening in the case of Goa Agriculture and Tenancy Act. This act was passed in 1964. Today, the Munkars and the tenants are facing this problem. The government has introduced a new amendment to the Munkar and the Tenancy Act, by which there is some sunset clause. Within 3 years, those tenants who had not claimed land from the Bhatkars then have to do it, and if they do not, the land will go back to the Bhatkar, and this is a kind of a conspiracy wherein the land will be sold to the real estate by the Bhatkar. So this type of a situation can arise. So we need a constitutional guarantee under Article 371I of the Constitution that yes, we will be having a special status, and there in that we will have a clause which says that land cannot be bought here. We have to protect our land. We cannot allow our beaches to be violated. Although there is CRZ violation, there are CRZ Act in place, there are a lot of violations, and sometimes they are overlooked. There are bungalows coming up on the hills, people are building on the hills, and there is hardly any, I think, place left. Vis-a-vis jobs, the Goan future of the Goan student is at stake. If you look at any place, you will find people from outside ruling the roost. They occupy top positions. And earlier people used to say that the Goans are not qualified. Today I have several examples where the Goans are qualified. They are fully qualified, but they are not taken. Whereas people from outside occupy all those positions. We are Indians. I am proud of being an Indian. I am proud of being a Goan Indian, because this small state which I have inherited from my ancestors, I want to preserve it for posterity, for the future generations, for the future Goan, for the Goan student who wants to work here, who wants to stay here. But his situation, the situation is very precarious for a Goan person. Vis-a-vis all the jobs and you name it, and the situation is very bad for the Goan. The ecology is very fragile. There are n number of violations that are taking place. I'll give you one example. Where a builder from Delhi by the name of Thapar developed a land which actually was a historical, it was a gunpowder factory. And there were 11 millstones there. One student of mine reported to me that that land is being developed, which actually is a gunpowder factory. So we had a campaign to save that place. We were successful, but we were not successful in protecting the site, but we were successful in taking the millstones and shifting them to the ASI, outside the ASI museum. So I can give you several examples where this has happened. So the natural heritage is at stake, the cultural heritage is getting diluted, the Konkani language is almost dying, and there are several problems related to this, because everyone wants to have a piece of the slice of the cake of Goa, because Goa is beautiful, and it is a matter of pride for a person from outside to have a piece of land in Goa. It's a summer villa that they have. Sometimes it is not occupied, so we have asked the government to place a non-occupation tax on it. So in such a situation, we definitely want a special status for Goa.
Now, the other problem is, I come from Delhi. I am originally from Delhi, 7 generations. Now, our problem is the same. The land is being taken away. Today, the required amount of land for per family in Delhi is 25 square meters. It's almost like a jail cell, according to our regional plan. The slums and commercialization in Delhi means that the original people of Delhi, the Muslims, the Kayas, the Delhi, the Urdu speaking, the inheritors of Shah Jahan, live in a commercial slum. The cuisine of Delhi has been wiped out almost because of the influx of Punjabis during the partition. I'm only trying to put this in a perspective, that this problem that is, it's real problem. But the problem is not specific to special small states. It is a problem which is a basis of this kind of world development problem, what we call globalization. In this context, in the last few minutes, I want to put to both our friends is, as a person concerned, as a person who's an outsider to Goa, outsider to Coorg, outsider to Northeast, outsider to Delhi as well. Actually, I don't identify anymore with that city which I love. The question is that if these movements for preservation of identity for land are entirely a matter for the local people and no alliances are made, they cannot succeed. So the last bit I would like to ask both Ponnappa and Praja is, what is their understanding of possible alliances in this struggle to keep this identity, this land? Because without those alliances, you will not win. That is my understanding of working for the last 30 years in the Northeast.
I think that's a very fair observation, one which we have to live with and look forward as to how we can overcome the situation that we are landed in. But, it is all very well to say that people who come and have the right to do what they have to do in a new place. But let me tell you that as and when you get into the history of the land that you walk on, if you belong to that land, if you know that that is the land where your ancestors have fought bloody battles to retain it, to give it the identity that what you are. I'm not saying anything that people should not come. By all means come, but respect the sanctity and the sacredness of the land that you have come to tread upon. Respect that. That is the most important issue. Today, some of our most sacred places have got vandalized by neighboring. We have the same problem as Goa, because we are on the western slope, we are on the eastern slope of the same Western Ghats. The land is being pillaged. There are 5 stars coming and building on the slopes and calling it rainforest, where rainforests don't exist at all, and they market it and brand it, and these are supposed to be the most responsible corporates in the world. And that is simply not acceptable. They get our people to dance our sacred dances from the poor in hotels, which is not, it is a complete insult to the culture of the place. And there are some of us who go and educate our people and say, but they say, where is the opportunity? 50 years ago, the promise was made that when we become part of Mysore state, through better education and skills, we'll be getting jobs. So the people who got educated went away. As Mrs. Hansal was saying, there's some very eminent Coorgs like Goans who have been the first ICS officers, Muthama, who's from Coorg. And on the other hand, 90% of Coorg are poor. So there is this huge dichotomy which is happening, and if we don't get people to respect the local traditions and the culture of the place, by all means get there, but do it. Do it to preserve the cultural diversity, to preserve the sacredness of that land. Our temples have got vandalized today. There are no more Coorgs in the temples. You take the way Talekaveri, the birthplace of goddess Kaveri, used to be worshipped a simple open land. Today, it has been completely, it's another Hindu temple. And to go there, I have to follow different rituals which I am not accustomed to. So this is what is the problem. We have to find the balance. We have to find a way for an autonomous existence, and by all means give outsiders a chance to come and partake of. As much as I would like to go to Delhi or Goa or any other place in the world and live in a responsible manner. I think the biggest threat today is tourism. You faced it for longer than we have. And what we want is responsible tourism. There's no more administration in Kurd where the Kurds are responsible for themselves. We have been disenfranchised. At least in Goa, you are administering yourself. This is a calculated move by the Karnataka government to alienate, and to virtually decimate everything Kurd.
Thank you, Punapa, but my question was slightly different. I speak as an activist, and I say, what are your alliances? Because while it is absolutely imperative that local people organize resistance, what are your alliances with others in this struggle? It is without that alliance. That is one. And the second question that I want to put, and we'll be ending soon with Prajal's thing, was that today you are not fighting, or we are not fighting government. It's not a question of autonomy, which in Assam, for instance, one state in Assam has around 15 autonomous units to preserve each particular tribal identity. And those autonomous units within Assam have played havoc. However, the question is not that. The question is today, it's a corporations, as you said. And corporations are not subject to the laws and the constitution, which is a fact. You can't regularize them. So now the fight in Goa or in Nagaland or wherever else is to stop corporate India, corporate international firms who are now owning these hotels. It is no longer just foreigners. They may come as Goans. So the issue again, a very central issue is too, and I think that would be very important if you could answer it or give your thoughts, Prajal, is that when we say Goans or Nagas or whoever we are fighting their identity, it's our own people who are the traitors. The first people who betray that identity are the rich and the powerful who form alliances with corporate or corrupt politicians and corporations. So in order to define an identity, you have to take this into account. Otherwise, the people who take advantage of a Goa Bachao Andolan or the kind of movement you are the people who take advantage of it and sell it. And second, in that fight, therefore, who are your allies outside Goa?
I fully endorse the views expressed by Nandita. At the same time, I would like to add, now alliances, speaking about alliances, it's actually not, shouldn't be about Goans versus non-Goans in that sense. It is, I would say, the people in Goa, the people living in Goa, that like within our Goa Heritage Action Group, there are people who are from outside, but they have been here for a long time, some more than 25 years, and they are working towards preservation of Goan heritage. So it's not exactly about Goans versus non-Goans. It's people who have been here for around 25 years, and in fact they have expressed their support to our movement for special status. I can cite so many examples wherein people from outside who have settled here for a long time, they have said that we definitely want special status for Goa. See, we are not even asking for inner line permit. When I went to Arunachal Pradesh, at the entrance to Arunachal Pradesh, on the border, I was asked for an inner line permit. We are not even asking for that. We are asking for a check, a constitutional guarantee that the influx, the massive influx of people from outside coming into Goa in search of jobs, in search of land, somewhere there has to be a moratorium, there has to be a check on, there has to be a control on it. Or else we will cease to exist. Goa will cease to exist. Because as I've said earlier about the job situation is very precarious. Whether it is Goa University or everywhere else, you will find people from outside. So where will the indigenous people, there was a session I think on indigenous people here, where will they go? To stop this influx, it's, as you have rightly said, it is also a nexus between the politicians, the real estate lobbies from outside, in connivance, due to the kickbacks and to make huge multitudes of money, they are here to loot Goa. Every day Goa is being traded. Sometimes I know, I've seen ads which advertise Goa abroad saying that Goan property is for sale. And this is a very disturbing trend. That Goa is for sale. Because it is beautiful, because the beaches are a major attraction, people want there. Fortunately we have the CRZ Act in place. Or else we would have found bungalows right on the beach, inside the sea also. That's also possible. So now, in fact Goa Bachao Abhiyan was addressing that. In 2006 when we had the Goa Bachao Abhiyan, there was this regional plan which was being floated by the then Town and Country Planning Ministry, wherein when we looked at the surface utilization plan, the whole of Goa was marked for development. To give you one example, there was a Tirakol Fort, and all around the Tirakol Fort there would be development. There would be buildings and buildings which would dwarf the Tirakol Fort. At the moment, the Tirakol Fort is being traded, and we have spoken to the GTDC that the Tirakol Fort should remain in the public domain. It cannot go to a private party from Bangalore or Delhi or anywhere else. And then these people deny us access. The Goans are denied access to the beaches. And then when you want to go to the beach freely, there are some guards from Orissa staring at you. And they give you that dirty look as if, who are you here? You are made to feel a stranger in your own land. And this cannot be tolerated. Everywhere you find, and this has been going on since Goa's liberation, that I remember that we studied in history about history of China, Chinese melon. And everyone wanted to have a slice of the Chinese melon, and then the Chinese had a revolution. We need a revolution in Goa. We are getting angry, we are getting agitated. So, to preserve this heritage land that we have inherited from Goa, ancestors called Goa, please appeal to the center. We have been making moves. We met with the then Prime Ministerial candidate Modi and handed over him the memorandum of special status. We are going to have a dialogue with the Union Minister. We have spoken to the some of the MPs have expressed their support. The local MPs have said that they will take the cause to the Parliament. And we are making moves in this direction, that we have to have special, and we have a uniform civil code in Goa which no other state in India enjoys. No other state in India enjoys the uniform civil code that the Portuguese gave us in 1867. So, in that sense, and taking all these parameters into consideration, special status is a need of the hour.
Well, I would like normally to end everything on a happy note, but I would like to say that I see all this happening on a all India scale. The monuments, Terracotta Fort to Taj Mahal, they are being privatized. Companies are being given Gulmarg to develop Gulmarg and tourism. So I think what is necessary at this juncture is for each one of these movements, and I say this again with my experience in Northeast, in which people have been doing armed struggle for 50 years, and Nagaland has continuously been fighting for its identity, and it has managed to preserve it. We wouldn't have been talking about Nagas if it hadn't been for this long struggle. So the struggles are important. Preservation of history, language, culture is absolutely essential. But a future struggle requires very different kind of strategies. And my understanding is that those strategies don't come by looking back into a golden age. It's into looking into future, into having alliances with other people who have other struggles. So when you say there's a massive influx, I still say that the real influx, the real people who should be fighting, because in Nagaland, whenever they get angry, in the same way that Prajar gets angry, they beat up the Bihari rickshawalas. When we have anger in Goa, you throw it on the Naga waiters who serve you in Kalangud. The real ordinary people must, when they are migrants and when we have a Northeast Association, the first thing we teach them and talk to them is please respect Goan culture. We tell them that if the Goans succeed in closing the casinos, we must support it. We don't want casinos in our part. But till that time, they are not to be blamed that the casinos are there. It's the rich, the corporate world. So the enemies are not ordinary people. It's that alliance among ordinary people that we need. Otherwise, it becomes xenophobic, it becomes inward looking, it becomes an anger which does not know where to vent itself, and it becomes ugly. It doesn't take us forward. So I really believe that Goa is a very special place. So is Coorg, so is Nagaland, so is every part, whether small or big. But especially those people who are vulnerable, especially that ecology which is vulnerable, especially those histories which are being forgotten, literatures which are already forgotten. But in order to preserve them, to evolve them, to develop them, to pass them to the children and grandchildren, we need a different kind of movement, not a backward kind of movement, a forward-looking movement, which needs all India alliances and international help and solidarity. Thank you.